My name is Hannah Nicole Maehrer, and my upcoming book is Apprentice to the Villain, and this is Young Entertainment. Wow, so excited to be FaceTiming with you.
So excited to be FaceTime with you. Thanks for picking up. So I know you have Assistant to the Villain, which is already out, your debut novel, and Apprentice to the Villain, which is coming out soon. How would you say or how would you describe those books? Like if someone's typing into Google, trying to find them, what would you say? So like I'm looking for a blank book.
So it is definitely sort of like the way the comps we use are Once Upon a Time meets The Office. So it's The Office with villains in a fairy tale world. I think it's like the most simplistic way to describe it. It's all about the villain's office and sort of all the shenanigans they get into and solving mysteries and romance and all of that good stuff.
Awesome. That all sounds great. Love it. And so Apprentice to the Villain's coming out soon. Can you describe it in 3 emojis?
In 3 emojis. Ooh, okay. Let me think. I totally forgot every emoji that
Take your time. I know there's a lot of them out there.
I feel like okay. I feel like the is there like a pixie one, like the fairy one?
I think there's a fairy one. Yeah,
One
yeah.
of those. I think there's a troll one too, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, one of those troll faces. Yeah.
Yes, and a castle, I think would work. Oh, I
That's really
think.
nice. I like it.
Yeah.
And so, I was doing a little bit of reading about, how your TikTok journey and then, turning that into, actual books. And I saw that you like to write about villains and all that kind of trope. So where did that interest kind of come from in that storytelling,
Oh
interest
my
in that?
God. I've always loved villains since I was very young. I watched a lot of Disney movies growing up, and the villains were always my favorite characters. And I sort of had the attitude where you should like don't make them so likable if I'm not supposed to root for them. But I also think just like as a person that likes to see every side of things, I think it's always really interesting to kind of analyze the concept of is this person good or bad, or is it just like the side you're standing on? Like, what does that mean? It gets me like very philosophical. But I've always loved villains. I like the idea of humanizing and almost making something funny that can be scary. So this was a very clear pipeline from childhood to now.
Very cool. And speaking of Disney, do you have a favorite villain from, any of those movies?
I feel like I always go with Hades, I think, from the
Mhm.
Hercules movie, because
That's a
he's
good
so
one.
funny.
Hmm.
And he's right most of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
He's just
That's
giving
that,
solid relationship advice left and right.
that's
Yeah, he's hilarious. I think anyone that's witty can get me pretty easily. So yeah, I think he's my
I
favorite.
definitely, yeah, Hades is a good one. That's a
Yeah.
great. And so Apprentice to the Villain is coming out soon, early August. Can you share if you have like a favorite line from the book? Are you able to share, one of those lines upcoming?
Ooh, okay. I gotta think. Oh my gosh. There's so many I feel like that I haven't shared aloud yet. There's
Oh,
a line at the beginning of chapter 2. I haven't shared the first line of chapter 1 yet, and I've teased at it because it's a really mean sentence to start the book off. And I've had lots of people asking what it is, and I'm like, I am not going to share it just yet because I feel like people are going to show up to my house with pitchforks
oh
and
no.
fire. So I'll share the beginning of
Okay.
chapter 2, which is the villain didn't miss light, he missed color, which is kind of, and some people caught this, it's a salute back to something he said about his assistant in the first book, or a way he described her in the first book.
Okay.
Um, so I love that line because it's a callback to book 1.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm excited to see the pitchfork type stuff in chapter 1. That'll be
Me
cool.
too, honestly. I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah, and so kind of transitioning, I actually studied journalism in school, so I'm always interested kind of asking people this. But what does your writing process look like? Do you like how do you just like sit down to write and like, start getting words onto a
Oh
page?
my gosh. There's this really I people have asked me this before, and the way I always describe it, there's a vine where you might know it, where two people are arguing, and I'm still really not sure what the argument was, but he's singing like her sister was a witch. It was like the
Like that.
arguing about Glinda. And I literally was like, that's me in my head arguing. That's like how my process goes. It's just arguing with myself. It's pretty chaotic. It's not organized. I think I've tried to be organized in the past and it never works out very well for me. So sometimes I can be like organized chaos, but I usually do my best when I'm just kind of going with the flow and seeing like where the story takes me. I think they call it a pantser. Like I fly by the seat of my pants when I'm writing. I think I always do the best creatively, or my favorite scenes always are the ones that I didn't plan to write, and the characters just kind of like did their own thing, and I was like just there to make sure everybody was, I'm just basically a glorified babysitter for my characters. So yeah, that's sort of what the process looks like. It's never quite the same. Every day's a little different, especially depending on if I'm drafting or if I'm editing. Usually it's pretty chaotic, but I like it that way.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Organized chaos, and then you clean it up in the
Yeah.
edit revising process.
Yes, you can always fix it later. That's
Yeah,
why I'm like, this is a problem for future
for
Hannah.
later, for later. We didn't
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah. Future
Exactly.
Hannah's always like, oh, why'd you do this?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I want to ask a little bit more about, that TikTok journey. I think it's a perfect outlet for storytelling and, gaining those followers to turn it into a book. So what made you want to, you're doing storytelling, and what made you want to start posting on TikTok, and, kind of building a following there?
Yeah, I think like everyone, I think so many people got on TikTok during the pandemic, and I was one of those people. I wasn't on it before. My one of my best friends had downloaded it, and she was like, "You have to get on TikTok." And my attention span's already so short. I was so concerned. I was like, my attention span's already too short, but I gave in and I downloaded it, and I'm so happy that I did because I quickly found like the book side of TikTok, like BookTok.
Yes.
And I like fell in love. I thought it was so great. There's this whole corner of the internet where people are talking about books and all of these other things. So I actually started posting. I'll attribute a lot of it to Bridgerton, mostly because the show had just come out and I had read the books about a year prior because I went through a big historical romance
Yeah.
phase, and that was like one of the really popular historical romance book series at the time, and still obviously is. And all these people were like contemplating what happens in the second book. And I was like, I know what happens.
Uh-huh.
I have to spread the word. So I made one video and then I kind of like pivoted into doing skits after that. And it just sort of like snowballed until I ended up posting my first assistant to the villain skit.
That's awesome. And yeah, so I wanted to ask, where did that idea for Evie and Assistant to the Villain originally come from?
It was actually, I was really just trying to think of like really funny skit ideas. I always loved the idea of writing like something very witty and satirical. And I love humanizing things that can be scary. It's almost comforting to me. It feels safer.
Mhm.
It makes me feel safer as a reader and when I'm writing something. So I originally was going to do a skit where I was the assistant to the fantasy heroine, and I was going to say something like, at 10 a.m., you have to let out a breath you didn't know you were holding, or something like that. I ended up doing villains though, because I had so many more ideas and I love villains. And I had done something kind of like that before where I had done a skit if I met the morally gray fantasy villain. So I I was just the assistant now in this one. And from the beginning, I remember when I posted the first skit, I in my head had like now the assistant was a character and not just me. Because the series started as if I was the morally gray fantasy villain's personal assistant. And I was like, they're in love. In my head, I was like, they're in love. Like right from the jump.
Uh, that's
Yeah.
so cool. I love that. And yeah, I wanted to, ask a little bit more about that book talk community. I love reading. I love that side of TikTok. It's such like a strong and like unified community. So like, what's been your favorite part of, posting and having that following? Do you have any like favorite, fan reactions or reactions from book talk that have like really stuck with you?
I think it's like there's an entire community of people that have like been following along with this since I posted the very first one. And it makes me very like beside myself and emotional when people comment, I've been here since the first episode. It's so wild to see like how far this has grown and how far you've come. And it really like makes me feel so connected to those people because they've been there every step of the way. They were there when I started writing the book and I started sharing excerpts of the book, and when I signed with a literary agent, and when I got a publishing deal, and when the book was published. So like every step of the way they were there and they were present. I'm sorry, my cat is joining the conversation. Um, Yeah, I think like my favorite thing was just sharing all the updates with everybody. And I feel like it's such a great, I've been very, very lucky. It's a great, very supportive, positive community of people. Um, and yeah, I just feel like very fortunate. I think when the book first came out, when Assistant to the Villain first came out, it was a very emotional day because I was holding it in my hands. I was seeing it in the bookstore, and I was just reading everyone's comments and crying because it was all so like everyone was like, "It's here, it's here," and I
Yeah.
felt like I was celebrating it with a whole bunch of people. Um, yeah, it was incredible.
Especially those people, yeah, like you mentioned, who have been there from day one to seeing,
Yeah,
this book in person and now seeing The Apprentice as the villain is coming out soon. So that's super awesome. Thank
yeah, it's
you.
wild.
Yeah, definitely. And just another kind of thing about, posting on TikTok. Do you have like a get ready with me routine before you post? Like, do you plan a lot, out, like really ahead in advance? Do you, have to do things with props, any type of that? So what's
It
kind of your,
depends on the day. I improv'd probably the first 50 episodes of Assistant to the Villain on TikTok. I always do better when I'm just seeing what comes out of my mouth. And
uh,
sometimes I'll do one take. That's usually the process. I'll do one take where it's just improv, and then I'll clean it up in the second take and just say the same things, but a little bit maybe faster, slower, cleaner, change one word,
yeah.
change two words, change a sentence, that sort of thing. But yeah, Evie has like a very specific look, and
Mhm.
it like evolved. It wasn't on purpose, but eventually the makeup became, she always had gold eyeshadow on with a wing and red lips. And that was like, I could not do it. And if I did not have stick on for the longest time, it felt like armor. How many times can I say like in a sentence? My goodness. It felt like armor though. I was putting it on and then I was becoming a character, and I now I'm Evie and I'm wearing this lipstick, and I actually did a get ready with me a while back of like get ready with me as Evie, and I was just doing like Evie's makeup or the assistant's makeup rather. Yeah. So
That's,
that's the usual routine, and she always has her journal on
uh-huh.
her. So I always have to have a journal nearby present. I have the original one. I've had it for years, and then I have a new one that I use sometimes too because it's very cute. It looks like a
Wow,
dungeon door.
it's very cool. I love it.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
And so kind of fast forwarding now to working on The Apprentice of the Villain. Just, is there anything that you learned about yourself in your writing process, specifically working on that book compared to, working on the first book?
Yeah, I think I got more confidence the second time. I I think that when I was writing the first one, I was sharing a lot, but it's still like a pretty isolating experience when you're writing a book. It just is, or when you're writing really anything,
Yeah.
truly, unless you have
Mhm.
a writing partner. But I think any writing process, no matter what you're
It's
writing,
very individual. Yeah.
it's just you and your laptop and you're typing, and that's it. And then it's like it's out there in the world and people are reading it, and that was just like a different dynamic going into writing book two because it's just a completely different like situation now that I'm in a situation where I'm writing the sequel to that book and a lot of people are looking forward to it. And not so much pressure. I just was like really in my head at the beginning, I think, but I got over it so quickly because I don't know. I think I just got a surge of confidence where I was like, you know what? I'm really proud of what I made. I'm so proud of it. And I'm proud of myself for continuing on into this book. And it ended up being like my favorite thing that I've ever written. Truly, like I love Apprentice to the Villain so much. I'm very excited for everyone to read it. I remember finishing it and just crying because I was like so proud of myself. So yeah, I think that yeah.
That's really special. And I'm sure it also helped with the confidence, having such a great, reaction from followers and readers after the first book. It kind of give you that confidence going into writing the
Yeah,
second.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. I think that it's still wild for me that like anyone is picking up and reading it.
Yeah.
So when it's like a lot of people picking it up and reading it and also enjoying it, it's very again, it's like very humbling. I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what do I do with my hands? What do I do with my face? Like, I don't know. I think I'm smiling weird. I don't know what's happening, sort of thing. But it's really, yeah, it's so wonderful. And it definitely made me feel like even more confident going into book two.
Yeah.
And just excited. Like every time I wrote a scene, I would picture people reacting to it, and I
Yeah.
would react the same way. So it was extra fun because I'd be giggling and I'm like, I can't wait for everybody to read this part.
That's really
Like
special.
we're all gonna laugh together. It's yeah, it's I think it's a very rare thing. I'm very, very fortunate and it's the best.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, so a lot of our for young entertainment, a lot of our audience is mostly young people who are looking to get into, acting, songwriting, writing, writing books. So we had kind of a couple, asking your advice questions just would to help them if they're reading. So, when you're writing, how does, editing and spelling and grammar work? Are you writing and you pick or like you edit, as you're going, or do you just kind of just put all the words on the page and then go back and edit? How does that process work?
I am a for later person. I think that I can't, if I stop, I'm not going to keep going. So I just need to get it all down. I'll do that in increments though. So I'll like sit for one writing session where I'll write like on a good day, 2000 words. Like, let's say I had a really good writing day, 2000 words. I'll go back through and read it just to make sure that I like it and that I want it to stay within the story. It fits with the story flow. And I'll sort of like reword sentences as I go. I am a terrible speller. To the point of embarrassment. I think that I wrote as someone had come up to get a book signed
Mhm.
for someone that had just had a baby. So I wrote congratulations and I misspelled it.
Oh,
And
that's a really tough word.
I was like so embarrassed. I looked down and looked up and went, I'm so sorry. You know what? My mistake is immortalized forever in this book.
That's
So
a tough word. I don't think I've ever spelled congratulations
there
right
you go.
either.
It's
So
hard, right? I don't know
I
why.
never know if it's the D or the T at
Guys,
the like in
that's
the
where I get, and the word definitely trips me up too.
oh,
I
yep, yep.
don't know why. So I'm a terrible speller. I rely on spell check far too much. And I'm very fortunate that I have great editors that have given me lots of tips that I'm taken. I think with each book, I've gotten better grammatically, at least for the sake of like the copy editors who
Uh,
work so hard to like make sure everything grammatically makes sense. But there's also so many great like book resources out there to look at like sentence flow and sentence
yeah.
structure. Some of it is artistic choice, like some of it might not technically be grammatically correct, but is
Mhm.
artistically
Yeah.
in the moment correct. I mean, you can get away with it sometimes. I think the one I read last time was I think it's Save the Cats, Write a Novel, I think is what it's called, or something like that. It's a great book on novel writing. It has all these different tips and tricks. And yeah, it's a great resource.
Cool. Well, yeah, for me too, when in doubt, spell check is the best friend. Yeah,
Always, always. I don't know how I would survive without spell check, honestly.
for sure. And then I was also kind of wondering, do you like for when your writing process, do you like designate a couple hours during the day to it, or do you ever just write when like a spark comes to? Like, how do you kind of schedule that out?
Yeah, I think when I was working like another job and now writing, I'm very, very, very fortunate to be writing full time now. But when I was writing, like when I was writing book two, I was also working a nanny job.
Mhm.
And so I had to plan out in the mornings, I'm going to do the writing. In the afternoon, I go to the nanny job. And then in the evening, I come home if I still have energy. All right. So I had in those situations, obviously, and so many people work full-time jobs and write. And have to like barter your time in between. So now I'm not sure what the process is going to look like for book three because this is a kind of unique. I've never done this time around, but usually I would plan for it, but I never forced it. If I would sit down in the morning and I'd be like, It's just not coming. I can't do it." I would wait till later, or I would just find pockets of time on the weekends, or sometimes I'd wake up randomly at 5 a.m. thinking I need to get this down right now, and I would just go on a writing sprint. So I try to follow the creativity, but you also obviously have to plan for time and
Yeah.
that. So I think it's a mix of both, like creativity, but also utilizing free time to be able to do it.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. And so when someone's first starting out, mapping out a story and, wants to share it with the world, what was the best way that you were able to get an agent, or what advice do you have, when considering different publishers and
Yeah.
agents and that process?
Well, I kind of went about it in it was a very unique way. And it's sort of the way that the whole thing happened because Assistant to the Villain was a skit series. And then I wrote it into a book, which I don't think is very typical. So it's same thing with getting an agent. I did do like the typical query track. So typically if you want to go traditional or if you go independent, it's a slightly different track. But traditional is what I know because that's what I did. And I queried agents. I sent out query letters to different agents that I thought would be interested in the book. And in addition to that, I also had an agent reach out who had seen a few of my videos about the book and was intrigued by the idea and said, if you want to submit to me, feel free. So I did that, and I actually ended up with that agent. I did have another agent interested, but I love my agent. We just clicked right away, and we both kind of saw the same future for the book. So it was a slightly different path than I think normally happens.
Yeah.
I was very lucky, but that just shows you like it's fortunate because social media gave me the platform to like get the exposure to like my agent was able to see that video of me talking about my book. So I think that you absolutely don't need to have a social media following, obviously, to be able to publish a book.
Mhm.
But it really depends on the person. I know I have many friends that independently published and are like the hardest workers ever because you take care of everything when you independently publish, and they're my superheroes. But both tracks are great. It really just depends on what's right for you. And yeah, that's
Yeah.
sort of what I know about it, at least. I'm still learning so much. I feel like I'm so new to the industry. I constantly am trying to absorb things that people that have been doing this much longer and much better than me
Uh-huh.
are telling me. So I'm like, I'm gonna be a sponge and just absorb everything.
I actually had a friend who recently self-published, and I was like looking into it just to see like, oh, like, do you want to do like only like online, or do you want to like publish the book, or like how's social media? And there's so much to it that I didn't even like realize that.
Yeah, because
that
it's almost like you have to be a business like
oh,
person in
you need to
addition to
do like
being an
social
author.
media, business, all
Yeah.
that other
Yeah,
stuff.
it's like it's a whole lot. That's why anytime someone independently publishes, I know like from my friends the work that and the stress probably that went into getting that done. And I'm like, good day. Like you're amazing. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so two more questions for you before we do like a couple rapid fire to end off. So we've kind of touched on this a bit, but for young writers and young creatives just looking for like an outlet to, tell stories and share their passions, just what advice do you have in terms of, having that outlet to tell those stories?
I think that follow your creativity. I found an outlet on TikTok that I genuinely have so much fun doing. And a lot of the videos I make can be considered promotional. And one of my friends came up to me like a year and a half or 2 years ago when I was talking about writing the book and was like, your marketing's so good. And I was like, thank you. It was an accident. I didn't
Uh-huh.
because it started as a skit series. It started as something fun and I kept it fun. And I think that that oftentimes can carry through the scene. So try to find things that work for you. It's going to be different for everybody because we're all very different and we're all talking about different books too. So find like what you enjoy and what works for you and that's what you should put out into the world, whether it be, doing marketing for your book or just writing your book. I think that truly when you're excited about something or when you're really in love with something you're doing, there's such a good chance that there's other people out there that will also love what you're doing. Um, yeah, so I think that just follow your creativity, I think is the best advice I've been given. It's never failed me. And also never compare yourself to other people. I think that's a good rule of thumb for anything because we're all on a different path. We're all starting in different places and different places in life too. So I think that, and they say comparison's the thief of joy. It's true. The only person you should be comparing yourself to is yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the best advice I've been given for sure.
That is very good advice. I learned, I mean, I even learned something from that. So that's
Yeah, I know. Me too. When someone told me that, I was like, yep, writing that down.
yep, yep.
Yep.
Awesome. And yeah, so just final question, really important question. We wanted to know, what is your favorite young adult or coming of age novel right now that you would love, other people to pick up or read or
I think this is such an actually, I think a lot of people really love this, so maybe it's not underrated, but in my head, I'm like, everyone should be talking about this book. The Wrath and the Dawn. It's a fantasy
okay.
It's a fantasy book inspired by 1001 Nights. I believe that's like the premise, or yeah, yes, it is 100% inspired by 1001 Nights. It's an amazing book. I love it so much. It's a duology. I blew through both of them so quickly, and it remains like a huge YA obsession. I'm absolutely in love with it. I
Okay.
want every
I haven't heard of that one, but I just wrote
It's
it
so
down.
fun. It's like Middle Eastern fantasy. It's absolutely fabulous. I follow the author on Instagram. I'm obsessed with her. So
All
yeah,
right. I'm
it's a
gonna have
great
to check
book.
that out. I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to check
it's so fun. Enemies to lovers too. We know
the trope.
we all love enemies.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. So yeah, so I just have a couple more, rapid fire questions to wrap this up. So it's all about firsts. So it's like your first book, first favorite character, stuff like that. So I'm just kind of run through. I think I have six, and we'll just run through first answer that comes to your mind.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So the first one is first book you ever remember reading.
Was Miss Spider's Tea Party? That was the first, my first, yeah, the first book I read with my parents.
And what is the first favorite character you ever had?
Um, I think it was, oh, you know what? I think it was Mulan from the Disney Mulan movie. I was obsessed with Mulan. Yeah.
And do you remember the first kind of TikTok about, storytelling and about Evie that you ever made?
Yes, I do. It's the first episode of Assistant to the Villain.
Nice.
Yeah.
And do you remember the first story you ever wrote?
Yes, I do. It was actually oddly enough a fairy tale story. We had to write a reverse. We had to this is such a funny pipeline. It was third grade and we had to write from the villain's perspective, but it had to be like a twist. Like the villain wasn't actually evil, funnily enough. And it was called Snow White and the Dark Prince. So I wrote it as if the prince was evil and the evil queen was nice.
Ooh, that sounds like a perfect setup to, your interest in villains and all that stuff. And
Yeah, we found it because we have it bound. We found it the other day. My mom was like, "Oh, the pipeline is so good."
pipeline to now, that's
Yeah.
awesome. And do you remember your first favorite young adult author?
I think it was, I almost said Rick Riordan, but I think he's technically middle grade. I
Okay,
want
Percy
to say.
Jackson?
Is Percy Jackson.
Yeah,
It kind of dips into YA towards the
I
end
would
of,
say that's why. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think it was because Percy Jackson was my first, like the books that got me into reading. So I would probably say Rick Riordan or uh who else? I feel like I read so many. Oh, Veronica Roth. I was very into Divergent as well. Yeah.
Those are, I love those books too. Very good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The last book traumatized me, but it was so
Yeah,
good. But
the Pop
traumatized
movie
forever.
is great. Yep, yep.
Yes, so good.
Awesome. And last one, I read online that you're a Swiftie, so we wanted to know what is your favorite Taylor Swift song currently?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to pick a favorite. What's one I've been listening to a lot? Um, oh, you know what? Electric Touch. I've been listening to that one a
Ooh,
ton
good one.
because it makes me think of somebody asked what makes you think of Evie and the villain in the second book, and that song came to mind. So I've been listening to it on a loop.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
a good answer. I love that
I
one.
love that one.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, that's kind of wraps it up for rapid fire.
Hi, my name is Hannah Nicole Maehrer, and thank you so much for watching. And please don't forget to subscribe to Young Entertainment.